Over the next couple days, we're going to be hearing amazing stories. We're going to be hearing about case studies. We're going to have research studies, clinical studies that are really revolutionizing the world of health as we know it. What we need to do is to figure out how we take this amazing new information and turn it into action. The role of nonprofits is a key part to that. You just heard about AMPA. Of course, we're here for WALT, celebrating 30 years. And the roles of these nonprofits have been, what we like to say, aggregate, obviously all these wonderful researchers, practitioners, their papers coming together, curating how we basically get our hands around them conceptually, and then disseminating among ourselves and hopefully outside of the bounds of this conference. And that's where we get to advocacy. And that's something that the PBM Foundation does. We are an advocacy group. We collect the papers. We help do partnerships with between institutions, universities, the government, researchers, practitioners. But the main thing is we're trying to move all this incredible body of clinical evidence into mainstream medicine. And what that is, we have goals. The first goal is how do we institutionalize PBM? Right now, in the clinical world of cancer, chemotherapy treatments, and the prevention of oral mucositis and the other side effects of chemotherapy, we are finally getting standard order sets, actual institutionalized treatment protocols in some of the leading cancer institutions in America. University of Pittsburgh Medical Center has done like 3,000 patients. The WVU, West Virginia University, has done about 1,000. But one of the gold standards, most people have heard about St. Jude. That's the leading pediatric cancer treatment center in the world. They are now into their 5th year of having PBM pre-treating all these young patients before they get their cancer treatments. They even have developed what looks like a popsicle to go into the mouth of the children so they're not traumatized by the devices. That's the kind of mainstream, institutionalized achievements that we want to get from all these wonderful papers that are going to be developed and shared this week. Military. The United States military has fully embraced PBM. Is now institutionalized as the conditioning routine for our special forces in the Army, for the SEAL units, and now getting into what we call warfighter capacity, warfighter effectiveness. This last June, we had 200, we're talking majors, colonels, and generals coming together at the Pentagon to talk about warfighter effectiveness. The first person who spoke, who's up there on the screen, Sergeant Major for the Marine Corps, advisor to our Joint Chiefs of Staff in America. The second sentence out of his mouth was, photobiomodulation is a critical element in warfighter effectiveness. I'd never spoken to the guy. That's the kind of breakthrough moment that we need over and over again. And there are many, many countries attending this conference. Every country has a military. Every country has police. Every country has first responders. We need to begin taking this solid body of evidence, and especially this kind of proven effectiveness in the United States military, and take it to all these other countries. Another thing is third-party endorsements. I mean, we have wonderful journals, photonics, biophotonics. We have had papers on PBM in the Lancet, but we still need to be doing things with government. And so in the United States, one of our great breakthroughs, it took us 5 years, PBM Foundation as the advocacy group, working with the Center for Disease Control, when they updated their opioid prescription guidance, they said PBM, photobiomodulation, is the preferred pain management alternative to opioids. It took us 5 years, dozens of testimonies and submitted statements, and we got that embedded into the Center for Disease Control. Same thing, VA, Veterans Administration in the United States. Boston being one of the leading areas, we were able to prove that PBM treats traumatic brain injury. It treats PTSD to the point where, again, in this case 2 years ago, the Veterans Department formally endorsed, formally recommended PBM as the preferred treatment for traumatic brain injury. We're now in 14 VA hospitals. There's 171. There's a long way to go. But the beauty is we got a formal recommendation from that government entity. Journal of the American Medical Association. This goes back again about a year. And again, all these things have been working on for years. They finally did a big spreadsheet about lower back pain. And on their chart, PBM was listed as the preferred treatment for treating lower back pain. Breakthrough, breakthrough, breakthrough. Food and Drug Administration, our FDA, they have messed up PBM for years. They don't call it the right thing. They refer to it as like a non-heating heating lamp. What we need to do is come up with a much clearer definition. We need to come up with a much more streamlined approval process for new devices. Last year in March, they actually came up with one. It took us, again, years of helping them draft it. Went out for public comment. It has not yet been finalized. We're now working with Congress to try to force the FDA to finally finalize that rule. So the beauty is that things like this, every country, certainly the European Union, England, all of these places have ministries of health. All these places have health regulatory boards. We need to be bringing this kind of clinical evidence that we're hearing here. And right now we average around 80 new papers published a month through all the different journals dealing with PBM. There's actually now about 316 clinical studies formally registered with the National Institutes of Health. We need to make sure all that evidence is getting into the right hands and getting into these regulatory environments. Another key part is reimbursement. There's been some work with the National Institute of Care Excellence here in England, National Health Service. We're trying to do a lot in the United States along these lines. Right now, Blue Cross Blue Shield, they're sort of a federation, so about 2/3 of their affiliates are now covering oral mucositis, PBM oral mucositis treatments. But Kaiser Permanente has got a couple units that are also doing it, but Center for Disease Control, or in this case, Centers for Medicaid, Medicare Services, we're starting to work with them to try to get them to do a national coverage determination, and all these other private entities. So again, reimbursement, we institutionalize reimbursement, we then institutionalize PBM. We've had a lot of success we were founded as a nonprofit in 2017. We've had a lot of success, but if you take climbing Mount Everest, we're still at the base camp. We have a long way to go penetrating the marketplace. Wall Street analysts are saying that if PBM became a mainstream medical procedure, it's $1 trillion industry. Think about that. $1 trillion is out there. So it's worth the effort financially. It's certainly worth the effort for all the people whose lives are going to save, lives are going to benefit. How do we climb this mountain together? How do we take a conference like this and turn it into action? We talk about creating an echo chamber. There are key people out there in hospitals, medical centers, medical associations, influencers in the media, people in the regulatory area, people in policy and in elected officials. They need to be surrounded by affirmative messaging and affirmative evidence. And so this one slide in particular, if you have to memorize one slide, and we certainly can make this stuff available, how do you create the echo chamber? Beachheads, good example. Almost every hospital in the world has what we call grand rounds, where somebody in one part of the hospital reports, like on a monthly basis, what they're doing to all the other departments in that hospital. We did this at Martinsburg VA Veterans a couple years ago. We have a very viable PBM usage in in the physical rehab department, and they presented, and the neurological unit said, gee, that sounds interesting. And so we can build the beachheads. We know we're in certain hospitals, in certain places. How do we make that one hospital, the entire hospital, every department in the hospital use PBM? So the whole aspect of grand rounds, building those beachheads. Again, the whole issue of policy forums. I mean, it's great to have Walt, but we should be sitting at the Oncology Association. We should be sitting at other American Medical Association. We should be sitting and having PBM tracks at other mainstream medical organizations. Build that echo chamber for those influencers. Different ways to do it. Raising awareness. Starting, again, when we first started back in 2017, we started going into social media. There's now 24 PBM Facebook pages, groups on Facebook. Everyone is using now hashtag PBM Heals. Everyone is using photobiomodulation. It helps aggregate. Someone clicks on the hashtag, they get articles across all of these different platforms. This last year, since India, Walt, front page story in Wall Street Journal. Praveen Irani and others, it took them months to convince the editors to finally run to that story. Sunday Guardian of India, both Praveen, Lou Lim, and Liebert, myself, have all written. And the thing is India is now the largest country in the world. Sunday Guardian of India, 50 million views for every edition. Think about that. So we've had PBM articles in front of 50 million people, not just in India, but the whole of Southeast Asia. USA Today, we got a front page article there in the last 8 months. So the other part is podcasters. There's tens of thousands of podcasters. Some only their family listens. Others have tens of millions of people. Get to the podcasters, get on the show. Public radio, public television. When Ann Liebert was at Shepherd University, she was on a podcast that had 3 million people worldwide listening. It's not that hard. Everyone's desperate for content. Everyone's desperate for what I call SMEs, subject matter experts, who are credible, who can speak articulately and engagingly. And as I referenced quickly earlier, science media. Yes, we're in biophotonics. We don't have any articles in the New England Journal of Medicine. We've been in Lancet, but only a couple times. Practice Update is an online aggregator of new clinical research being published. We need to find, of all the 300 plus people attending this conference, 2 or 3 degrees of separation. Who knows the advisors, the editorial board, the writers on any of these journals, so we can get in front of them, educate them, and get them to start publishing the kinds of articles that are being presented here. Again, the world of policy and politics. Political people like to be on camera and on record helping their constituents. We've been able to do that in the United States. Shepherd University, and again, one of the flyers at our booth, has done an amazing job on a pilot study showing how PBM weans people off of opioids and other addictions. It actually reduces the physical need and the neurological need, and we're about to ramp up a much larger study on campus using state and federal funds. But the key is that we were able to get the Attorney General, who's about to become our governor, and the state auditor, who's about to become our Attorney General, come and have a whole ceremony celebrating the pilot study and the results, incredibly dramatic results of the pilot study. And so it went everywhere in the state of West Virginia because they were both running for office.
Thank you, Scott.
Yeah, right. And there was Tom's device was the featured item there. We also had a number of us meet at the White House with the drug people because, again, the opioid issue is a huge issue in America. The final photo there, we are partnering with other stakeholders and advocacy groups. In this case, back in March, there's a group called the Brain Injury Association of America, Brain Injury Association, and they had 400 people fan out across Capitol Hill talking about brain injuries the importance of funding research, the importance of funding coverage. So I briefed them all on PBM. So we had 400 people, not just a couple of us here in PBM Foundation, 400 people in another stakeholder group, fanning out across Capitol Hill, talking to members and senators directly about brain injuries, but also how PBM can help. We also are now working with the Disabled Veterans of America and other groups. So in every country, there are stakeholder groups, there are advocacy groups that are natural allies. We need to reach out to them and say PBM is the solution for them as well. We have a long way to go, but Buckminster Fuller, who's one of the great futurists of the mid-20th century, talked about a trim tab. Large ships, like the big oil tankers and all, have a smaller rudder that helps move the bigger rudder. And what he basically said is little things lead to bigger things. And that's what we really are here to do, a call for action. As all of us are here today and all through the weekend, how do we take what we're learning? How do we take these new papers, these new great pieces of evidence, and how do we make little things happen? That podcast, that op-ed, that posting on social media to turn the whole ship of world health in our direction. So I thank you much. PBM Foundation has been proud to be part of VAULT, proud to be part of the PBM movement, and our flyers and QR code is over there at the booth. So I thank you very much.